Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So today we're going to talk about why smart people fail. Okay, so there's a lot of thought that when you're smart, you should be able to be successful at everything. You should be the wealthiest person out there, etc., etc. Those things simply are not true. In the Millionaire Mind, it actually goes through a list of the richest people in the world, and you will see that a majority of them, based on intelligence tests and IQ tests, they're not necessarily the smartest people out there, but they're most successful people out there. So success comes from an action pattern. It comes from a belief and an attitude. It doesn't necessarily come from mental acuity. And one of the things that I think is relevant and typically always there in consulting situations, you're dealing with very intelligent people that own businesses. They do something very well, so now they open a business to sell that service or product, and they run into struggles. And one of the struggles that I see very often is they think the business should be successful because they're very smart. So let's say they have a patent that's one of a kind. Let's say they have a business model that's one of a kind. AI is very specifically relevant right now. So let's say they have an AI model or a bot that's very specific and one of a kind. That intelligence that it took to create those things and that attitude to create those things might not give you the attitude that you need to build teams and support a business. Okay, so that's something that comes up often in consulting situations is people are like, I'm very smart, why isn't this working? And they get angry and they become defensive. And so then they build walls instead of allowing certain people to help them in a way they could. So that comes down to what would be a mental mistake. So there's mental mistakes, there's emotional blocks, and there's behavior problems that get in the way of people's success. No matter how intelligent they are, these things are always going to be present. So if they don't know how to address and assess these things, or assess and address them rather, they're going to have a problem. Because once, it goes back to if you have a business and you run off all your customers, right? One of the viewpoints, I saw this was a person that I met in my distant past, had a business, and every time someone had a complaint, they wanted to attack the person having the complaint. Now, you've heard me say on this channel how valuable complaints are. Complaints are fantastic because it's telling you where your service or your product are falling short. Even if that comes from a state that's angry and poignant and has a different viewpoint altogether, that's fine. Everything does have a modicum of truth. So you can dive down in it and dissect it down to the atoms, and you can find those molecules of truth that matter that you can improve yourself on. So look at everything like that as an education. But when you have people that have a lot of potential, but they never live up to it, there's always a reaction. And typically these folks won't go in the right direction unless they do hire a consultant. They do hire somebody they treat as a trusted advisor. If they don't do that, they may be stuck. And these are the reasons why. So first, there's mental mistakes, and we'll talk about those. There's a lack of concentration. That's number one. Using the wrong abilities. That's number two. They can't see the forest for the trees. That's number three. They're spreading themselves too thick or too thin. That's number four. And number five is they're inflexible, meaning they don't have the ability to think or respond appropriately in problem solving. So let's go through those real quick. Lack of concentration is what it is. If you cannot focus on the work that's in front of you because you're too busy doing something else, if you're multitasking, you're not going to get something done effectively. So you're going to have to come back to it. That's waste. So when you talk about muta and you talk about waste, rework is one of those types of waste that you have to cut out of your system and your schedule because it is causing you to waste time. That's the thing about multitasking. If you want a job done well, focus on it, get it done, move on to the next thing once that's complete. And you don't have to go back. Do it right the first time. The old adage, measure twice and cut once, that's exactly what that means. It's not just a carpenter's saying. That also has to deal with management and leadership and those type things. So lack of concentration, that's number one. Using the wrong abilities. So like I said earlier, an inventor that came up with something incredible may not be the person that has the personality type to run a business. So someone that's of high intellect around creativity and engineering and things of that nature, sometimes the back and forth to them is absolute. Meaning, when they're dealing with people, they basically see my opinion is right and you should not have an opinion counter to mine. Well, that's great and all, but when you're in a room with two people, that's not going to work. And when that number of people increases, it's going to get far worse, because then you have people team against you now because you're so stoic or so steadfast in your viewpoint. So if you're doing that, you're using the wrong abilities. You need to have a hat that you wear where you're an inventor hat. You need to have a hat that you wear where you're in a boss hat or a leader hat. And those two things need to come from different action patterns. If you're not able to do that, then you need to hire somebody that's got that opposite side of the coin. We also talk about on the channel how you spend 80% of your time working in your strengths and 15, in something that's less, and then 5 in things that you hate. That way you can generate new growth and learning in each one of those aspects. In a situation where mentally you might be different than what's required to do the job, that's very simple. You hire somebody to do that job and you delegate those tasks to them. In doing that, you protect your business and you protect the fluidity of your business, and you retain that most important asset, which is respected, hardworking team that does exactly what you need them to do. So that's the second piece, using the wrong abilities. The third in that is you can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes people get so focused on a singular problem, they're bending over to pick up pennies while they're losing dollars. I say that in financial reviews when I'm reviewing companies' P&Ls and see what's going on. Sometimes we're spending so much because we got to have this, when in truly you don't. And if you look at the big picture, you'll see that this is costing you a lot of money by doing it this way. Sometimes when I go into businesses and see that they're doing customizations for a specific customer, there's a lot of times where the specifications or the specs that the customer requested, they're going overboard. And so they're doing all this extra, and then you go to the customer and you audit the customer doesn't like all this extra. They just want this. So what you end up finding out is what they're doing that's extra, that the customer is paying more for, the customer then undoes once it gets to them because they don't like it. So in the idea, that's a communication issue. You can't see the forest for the trees. So sometimes you keep things simple. That keep it simple, stupid principle, that KISS principle, it is relevant, right? The simpler you can keep things, the smoother it is. You get to reduce that waste, that extra process, that extra movement, that goes out the window. You make more money and you waste less time. Can't see the forest for the trees. Next one is spreading oneself too thick or too thin. Too thin, if you drive yourself ragged, you're not going to do quality of work. The quality of work is going to fail. The quality of product you're producing is going to fail. Whether it's a product or service, more of you is not necessarily better. Because once you spread yourself too thin, ultimate exhaustion is going to take place, and you will fail based on that exhaustion. If you think about dentists and you think about psychologists and you think about those folks that have the highest suicide rates in professional jobs in this country, it comes to the point that it's exhaustion, it's exertion. These people have gotten all this education, but instead of listening to what I said earlier about using their own abilities or can't see the forest for the trees, instead of them hiring someone to run their business, they try to run their business and do all the quality of care as well. And that you can only do that for so long. Maybe it's a year, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 3 years, but you're not going to be able to do that forever. Because basically, let's use a dentist for example, if you're a dentist for 8 to 12 hours a day, and then that day's done, and now you have to be an office manager for another 6 hours a day, that doesn't leave room for family, sleep, and food, right? So you're going to have to delegate things to other people. You cannot micromanage every action of a business. What you have to do is find a trusted advisor, find a trusted source, hire the right people, have that trusted advisor edit and audit them often, and run a business appropriate like that. If you spread yourself too thick or too thin, it can be bad for you and bad for the business. Too thick is where you're the poster boy or the poster girl for the business and everything comes back to you. You can't do that either, because ultimately that means everyone else is being micromanaged, and you will not keep good people for very long with that being the mental thought process. The last one is, and that mental mistakes, is inflexible thinking or problem solving. It's very simple. Problems basically evolve every single day. If you do things the same way, one of the worst things you can hear in a business is we've always done it this way. If you've always done it this way, you're not looking for opportunities to do it differently. And what if what you did work, but what if it took 12 extra steps to get there? So one thing that companies should always do is reevaluate processes for waste, reevaluate how they handle things to see what waste is there and if they're doing it appropriately and if they're mitigating as much risk as possible, if they're including everything that needs to be, so you can prevent the problems in the future. One of the things that I see, I'll mention this, at one company where I was consulting, I went and they had a rework table. So instead of going back to fix the defect issue to begin with, they just knew they were going to have this many defects based on what they were doing, so you had a rework table. So you're creating waste to handle waste. You've got somebody producing stuff that you can't sell, so what you do is you have somebody else rework it again so you can sell it, and this is just the normal process, as opposed to say, hey, don't put anything on the line that you can't sell. So if you fix the quality issue up front through retraining and disciplinary actions, etc., you take away the necessary piece of this job, other than demarking the issue and then having the waste piece go back to the original producer. That's another way to handle it too. But that's still rework and it's still waste. So think about that. Inflexible thinking, well, this is how we always done it. No, look at it and say, why are we making all these considerations? I went to a company one time and they had 6 quality inspectors on their production line. I said, why do you need 6? And they were like, because in each place it will get past this person. We just need to catch it before it goes here. 6. It takes 6 to do that. So you got someone producing it. You got this person doing quality here, this one here, this one here, this one here, this one here. Why not just hire the right person here and get rid of all these jobs and pay this person whatever it takes to get it right and remove all this necessary extra heads. Remove these 6 heads and tell you what, hire 2 of these. Slow down the production process, pay them more because you're giving them the wages that you were given 6, pay them more for quality production, QC it with a spot check and do it that way. You're saving 4 salaries, right? And you're doing a better process that has less waste and better quality production. So be flexible. So the mental mistake is inflexible thinking and problem solving. The next is emotional blocks. So why do smart people fail? Well, emotionally, just because they're mentally smart or have an acuity that's beyond others, it doesn't necessarily mean that emotionally they're strong, or they may not have the emotional intelligence that's required to be strong. They have a lack of personal belief, which is what that comes from. So let's go through these emotional blocks. Fear of failure is one. Some people are so fearful of failure that they don't move. It's paralysis, right? They freeze in place and they're not making that progress. So fear of failure is the number one. Blaming others for mistakes is number 2. That will kill a business faster than anything else. If you're blaming other people for mistakes, you're not learning from them. And if you're not learning from them, if someone else is at fault, then there's no value from that situation. So failure for you is actually failure. You're not getting any better and you're not growing from it. So blaming other people. The next one is the poor me attitude. That's a negative connotation. No one that's got a poor me attitude can hold anything up for very long. Okay? No matter what role they're in, that's a person that has to be replaced. And if it is a smart person that's the head of the business, now you're in trouble. Untreated depression or anxiety. Look, people that have chemical imbalances, that's out of their psychological control. So if they do have untreated depression or anxiety, that's going to impact every aspect of their life, and they're not going to be able to perform to a point, and that will cause them to fail. The next is excessive dependency on others. My grandmother used to say that one can't carry his own milk, right? It goes back to that water saying. People who carry their own water understand the value of every drop, okay? Excessive dependency on others means you're not comfortable standing on your own. When you're not comfortable standing on your own, typically there's other suggestions there, meaning you don't have a proper understanding of the situation, you don't do what you say, there's some character issues that may be a problem there too, so other people have to kind of shade your character issues. So that's why excessive dependency on others is an emotional block on why smart people fail. And the last third of that is behavior problems. So when you're talking about why smart people fail, a lot of them have the same behavioral problems where, 1, they have a lack of motivation, 2, procrastination. Procrastination can be brought on by what we said earlier, paralysis from analysis. Analysis paralysis is what they call that. When you're too busy trying to figure it all out that you don't make any movement forward, and that will stop you. So that does look like procrastination, but actually it's a productivity issue. The next, number 3, is inability to focus or follow through. The follow through is the key point of that. A lot of people can focus on saying this is that, but then they don't follow through or they don't sustain. The majority of businesses that fail actually had the correction in place, but then they didn't sustain it. Because this is the way we've always done it. So the issue is they revert back to the prior state, which was leading them down the wrong path anyway. So inability to focus or follow through. The 4th example is lack of impulse control. Lack of impulse control. When I was a young man, I just thought this for people who had drug and alcohol problems. They would come in and act completely out of character and lose their minds because they were on or under the influence of something. Well, in modern times, it seems like it's a growing problem with people's mental issues. When I was young, everybody didn't have mental issues. Mental issues were a bad thing. Your constitutional rights can be limited based on your mental situation. So if you have mental issues, you can lose your rights to own certain things or buy certain things or do certain things, so or serve in certain ways or have certain jobs. So this lack of impulse control that seems to be such a fad right now, people act like everything's not videoed, etc. It's much more prevalent than it should be. Okay, so that's a behavioral problem that will cause people to fail. And then the last one is inability to translate goals into actions. A lot of times, the only thing that's needed is an end date. Have a target date to do it by, so you can motivate people in a proper way to be taking steps to that end goal so you can have that success. A lot of times failure is because there's just 3 or 4 things that haven't been done appropriately. So if you don't have someone reviewing that and reviewing your business strategy and structure and how you're doing things, guys, pay the fee. Pay for a business consultant to come out and look at that. Pay for someone to come in and get eyes on. Have someone voluntarily come in and get eyes on. Someone you respect, someone that can give you advice that you're going to listen to. Have them get involved if you're in this situation where you have an inability to translate goals into action. Because if you don't have an action plan for every goal that you have and it's not dated, then it's just a pipe dream. At the end of the day, to have a goal, you have to be taking daily actions to it, 10 minutes to 20 minutes a day at least, if it's not a productive goal, right? If it's not a production-based goal. Numerically, if it's a production goal, you need to look at what production is doing. You need to create a standard of work. You need to address that standard of work and cut waste, continuously until you have the improved standard of work. So there's a ton of different things you can look in that where you can come up with solutions to these issues. So that's why smart people fail. That's the 15 things that stand out from a psychological standpoint on why intelligent people have a tough time and don't make it. If you like content like this and you enjoyed this video today, please like and subscribe. Please subscribe and share the channel. We're trying to grow this channel, and I appreciate your attention today. I'm Ben. Be good.